Cool. So I'm going to, again, lightning fast. Most of what I talked about came earlier, just to set up the next talks. I'll give a few broad thoughts about PMF and measuring and experimenting, riffing on what John said. And then I'll talk a little bit about those markets that I showed before and how to drive towards it. So as John described, finding PMF is a search process. You have to find like the right intersection of problem, the right market where there's a lot of people that have that problem and are willing to pay for it. And you have to build a product that intersects with that. And over time, you're nudging the product to find the right structure that meets the market. The thing that you have built may not fit the market. And so you have to nudge it over time. And so it's fundamentally a search process. A search process is an experimental framework where you can measure where you are and take steps over time and remeasure where you are, which is why metrics are so critical. This is where, both in building MVPs and measuring their outcome and iterating towards success, this is what lets you do the gradient descent to find the right spot. Now, I think a lot of people here are new to product market fit, but we've been doing this for many years. A lot of us have been working on this kind of tooling around Filecoin for many years. It's just that a lot of that thinking was done in smaller groups, in private, in various docs, and it isn't as public and clear. I'll give you an example. Here's some metrics from 2021 on finding product market fit for Filecoin concretely. We looked at the capacity growth. We looked at the data stored on Filecoin growing over time. This is back, when it was a lot smaller. We ran surveys on would be very disappointed. We looked at the bounce rate of various users falling off. And so we've used a lot of these metrics. The problem with these was that they were run in a private group, and we need a good way of doing this in public as a network to understand how we're doing and across a few different segments, because not all of them are, don't think of Filecoin as a single product. It's a platform with a few different products on top that meet different segments of the market. I show this slide a lot. It has PMF dashboards in it. It has the Web3.storage PMF dashboard embedded in it. It shows the actual graph over time. It has the NFT storage PMF dashboard in. It has the data stored by industry dashboard that I think is no longer there. That used to be a graph that we had. It's gone now. And this gives you a sense of PMF as well, right? So Filecoin has PMF on a certain set of segments. We just don't have it in other areas. And so I think getting these metrics will be very, very helpful for us to understand where we're headed. The data onboarding that is coming from various users, regions, use cases, and on-ramps, that's what we need to understand and navigate which use cases are working. And then the developer activity across those. Those are two segments that if we had, we would be a lot better at understanding PMF. But to be clear, PMF for the capacity side is very strong, right? This represents hundreds of millions of dollars of value. Now, one note on prioritizing, there's lots of different frameworks out there. I think the network needs something like the ICE framework. I like this one because it's very, very simple. You just rate ideas in terms of the impact that they might cause, the confidence that you have over that impact, and how easy it is to do. And then you use those scores to prioritize. Lots of startups use these kinds of things. There's a bunch of other frameworks, but we just need something that the whole network can use. Right now, there's a set of people that are doing PMF finding for their product, and that's good. But in the interstitial parts across the teams, where things are falling through the cracks is that we don't have these tools in a network-wide setting. So one of the things that I would love to get out of this FDS is some set of public tools that we can use and commit to and maintain that give us an indication of what are we trying, how are we experimenting, how are we getting close to PMF. We've done, again, we're not starting from scratch here. We've built a ton of this stuff from the past. Here's a big spreadsheet of PMF finding that we did in the past that broke down various different market segments and the conditions that they need and so on. So we can reuse a lot of this tooling. So now let's talk about markets. Again, Filecoin is a large platform. It has different segments. These different markets function fundamentally very differently. And in my observation, where a lot of people get confused and argue past each other is that you're fundamentally talking about two different markets and you're trying to use the same exact software and the same exact part of the protocol to hit both. And instead, you should be using that common part as a platform to then build another component on top. So the goal for these markets, I already went in detail earlier, the goal for these markets is to build some measurement tooling that enables us to understand how we're doing in each of these markets. And that's where the service classes, SLAs, SLOs, SLIs, stuff that we're going to talk about comes from. It's a framework and tooling to, in a network-wide way, understand how well we're meeting these requirements and how we're tuning for them. Meaning each of these markets will express a set of requirements to meet in order to succeed. And we need a network native way to understand how the network is behaving against that market so that we can optimize it and improve it. And more importantly, so we can drive incentives towards it. Because we have in a decentralized network, the fundamental problem is how do you organize and coordinate a large parties towards those landscapes. So what I would like to end up with is like some kind of, scorecard where we could have, a service category and then, specific service classes, and we could grade the PMF that we have on each one of these quarter by quarter. Like this would be awesome. And the way we can get there is by defining these service classes, figuring out the concrete SLAs and SLOs that those mean. SLAs are service level agreements. It's, a very small, narrow set of things that you guarantee to the user. SLOs are service level objectives. These are the measures that you set for yourself to meet. Usually you have a lot more SLOs than SLAs because you're trying to do a great job, but you're not, fundamentally agreeing and committing to. And then SLIs are service level indicators, which are specific measures that you use to test how you're doing. And so we need a way of assessing these in network native way across the landscape so we can weave incentives against it. We have the first example of that with Spark and RSR. I guess that's the second example. The first example is just the verifiability of the proofs. That's like one piece. But we need more of these to tune them to fit the market. Cool. I think that's it, and I'll give back some time. Any questions?
Measurable. So how we define it, and then we're able to actually put it in a graph. So something like the number per one of these, the verticals that you were showing, okay, how many would be very disappointed clients do we have in that specific vertical? What is the volume of data that is trying to onboard and or successfully onboarded within that vertical? How much network revenue are we earning from that vertical? What are the network costs within that vertical, aka what the network is spending on the, the tooling and the SP block rewards and yada, yada, yada. Are there if we're going to go and try and make graphs that allow us to look at product market fit within these different verticals, I worry that we sometimes get stuck in the anecdote side of things, but we also aren't clear enough on what we actually need to measure such that we can then have graphs that we trust and that are actually pointing us in the right direction. So are there other things in there that we should be measuring that get us
a whole range of these, and they probably depend on a per market basis. Each market can probably be measured a slightly different way. And so you need a set of indicators that tell you how well you're doing on each of these markets, and you use that to understand how you're doing as a whole, right? So whether or not you have PMF do you have PMF on a set of markets? The thing about markets and the reason I tend to draw them kind of like this is that they're kind of fractal in nature. A big market is composed of smaller markets that are more specific. And the whole adage in startup culture of find a small market and then grow from that is about simplify the problem for yourself, find a small section of that market, do really well, and then from there grow. And so big markets decompose out into smaller markets. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they're adjacent, sometimes succeeding in one market opens up another one. And so we just need to be able to evolve our thinking to be able to reason about these markets together as a network and to be able to measure how we're doing on these markets as a network and then understand what the gradient is, what the problem is, where are the gaps, what are we not meeting so that we can solve the problems.
Two quick additions to things that you said. I think completely agree about the importance for dashboards and metrics. I think just for any team in here, especially if you're a nucleated team, I wouldn't you don't have to wait for those dashboards. Not all the teams that have been spun out have the funding themselves to create network wide dashboards. And it sometimes really just takes 5 conversations with potential customers to understand certain things. And also a lot of the really important feedback happens in those conversations. So like, why didn't a deal happen is hard to put. Like, I know Jen from D-Store has amazing data on like objections and things that are harder to get into on-chain graphs. So that's point one. Like, don't wait, just start interviewing. In my book, just go. And 2 is, I think one thing with the Dropbox framework, which is kind of interesting to think about, is like the Dropbox framework, at least from my perspective, is it's talking about like features that we have and their product market fit with the like with folks. I think this is like our technology.
This is less about features and is more about experiments. It's like, I'm going to try this experiment.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I think the one point I wanted to make there was just making sure that you treat your product market fit search process like a scientist. Like, don't bias your results. Don't put problems in front of people that you expect them to have. And yeah, I think that's the
this could go for campaigns as well, like marketing campaigns. Like, oh, we want to try this thing and see how it goes. But yeah, I think we like need some like network wide version of this. By the way, like if you want dashboards built, guess what? We now have public goods funding tools. So if you use your voting power to reward dashboard builders with RetroPGF, you will get more dashboards. You don't have to fund it yourself. You can now use network money. All right, cool. Any last question? Yep.
Yeah, I do. I want to talk about what we've talked about, what needs to be public on a pull request. Specifically, we were talking about quarter by quarter, talking about which providers can service which classes and why this is important, right? Because there's a number of tools that have been built and nobody knows what they do anymore and what state they're in. And why this is important is because people come to us through lead gens and we don't know what's active anymore.
So I'll make the claim that I want to be able to grade it quarter by quarter, like with this group, but this needs to be real time. This needs to be a real-time measurement of how we're doing across any market.
That's separate. I understand. Sorry.
Yeah.
2 different publicly available, readily available, updated dashboards and or pie charts, graphs, whatever.
Yeah. Like we're building a product together. We need the metrics available together. It's just like, it's a network good that we need to have. We need the measures together.
And then your one with the different swim lanes or columns of products. This one, but the one that actually had the classes and then Web 2, Web 3. Yeah. Why this also, I think, could be public or in some shape or form, and something I'm going to talk about, is at the lowest level, we're converging into new types of SPs. And those SPs are going to have, in some form, different types of gear that they are going to have to potentially buy, purchase, rack, stack, and advertise to be able to meet these classes of storage. And this is very important because as a whole right now, most SPs tend to look about the same, what they have on the network. And this is going to be very helpful going forward for what I'm calling SP version 2 with something like Curio that solves a very specific problem as well. But this is very important because Even Seal Storage has to go out and buy new bill of materials to meet the needs for these potential customers. So this is very important for the entire network as a whole, at least at the infrastructure level as well. That's a really good slide, by the way. I like that one. Thank you.
All right. I think I can hand it off to the next person. I think Steve.
All right.